Welcome to another edition of the Just Basketball Show. I'm Brendon Kleen. That is Chris Manning. We are joining you on a Friday for a end-of-week show. We have absences and returns to get to today. It's that part of the year where injuries are determining a lot, and we're going to go through who's back, who might not be back, what that means long-term, what that means for the playoffs, what it will impact the rest of the season. You can follow us wherever you find your podcasts, audio, Spotify, Apple, of course, YouTube. If you're here, hit follow or subscribe to get this show in your feed twice a week. You can also drop a comment below on YouTube and follow us on social media. Wherever you are, we are TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Chris, I wanted to give you some sort of nice insight. We're going to start with Kevin Durant as far as the returns go, and I was at his debut yesterday, but it was a little uneven. I was going to have some cool thing to say to you, some nice thing to fire off about how lucky I was to be at the game or some cool insight that I got. I don't have much. Durant looked rusty.
I have a question for you. I have a question for you that I think hits on kind of what you're looking for, and I think it takes us out of the just wondering too much about, like, how did he look, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. I think this is a unique return for a couple of reasons. Number one, obviously, you don't get many mid-season all-star trade deadline big trades. You just don't. We don't get guys of Kevin Durant's caliber historically and right now getting traded at the trade deadline. You just don't get that. Secondly, he was supposed to have his home debut, and he got hurt in the warm-up for said previous home debut. So this is like a delayed, anticipated thing. The playoffs, the stakes are coming. So I ask you, what was the energy like? What was the mood like? I've seen a couple quotes here and there from Suns players. I saw just recently an Okogie one. But for you and being in that arena, taking it in, tell us about what the energy was like.
The energy was awesome. He went first in the pregame announcements, pregame lineups, and Booker went last. Cool little thing. I don't know if anyone else nerds out about that, but I do. It's a cool way to do it.
I love that. I love that stuff.
Booker has to be last, right? How did they do it in Cleveland when LeBron came back? I assume he just immediately became last. Did Kyrie get called first? What was that? How did that play out?
I think Kyrie was first, and they always did LeBron last. And now they do it like positionally, so it's like it goes Darius, Donovan, Okoro, and ends with Jared Allen.
Well, I feel for Donovan Mitchell. I feel like he earned that. It's okay.
Yeah.
But no, the energy was awesome. I've never seen one human being get more attention doing something so inane as pregame warmups, but there were more cameras and human beings circling the Suns side of the court before the game. Probably halfway to measure if his ankle was going to bend again, and halfway just to see the real in the flesh KD, which it's been 7 weeks almost since the trade happened, so it was a little bit crazy that we're still waiting and that it finally happened yesterday. But yeah, he's going to play 7 games with this team on top of the 3 he already played. So what was already going to be, the shortest little runway we've ever seen got cut in half, and he didn't look awesome. I'm not worried about that. I think he was just forcing some shots and not really himself. They still won over Minnesota in what was a pretty big game anyway, and he made some big buckets in the third quarter especially. So, off to a fine start. They're going to get it figured out offensively, I think, without a doubt. We'll see them play a better team on Friday with Denver. But, yeah, it was honestly funny to see Durant be nervous. Durant, admit to feeling some nerves. That's not a condition that I would associate with anybody who's in the Hall of Fame of anything that they do. And yet he was like, sometimes you want it too bad. That was what he said. So what did you think? You watched the game.
Yeah, he looked rusty. He looked like someone who came off a second injury that kind of delayed any rhythm he had. It looked like it was a big moment that he was eager to get back. I came away thinking the Wolves are pretty good. I think the Wolves, since Cat's been back in a way that I didn't have super high expectations for that, but they look good at coming back, and they've looked like a legit kind of annoying team to play. I think the right word is kind of scrappy. It was kind of just kind of going through it. I also enjoyed that Michael Phelps was at this game. I always enjoy I understand maybe just Suns games are hot now. We talked about Emma Stone, we talked about all that, but
He lives here. He does live in Phoenix. So he went to ASU.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So
he's from Maryland.
He lives in Phoenix. He comes fairly often. I don't know if he really loves being shouted out each and every time because he's notoriously a little private and high strung in some ways. So it is what it is. But
so let me ask you. I have one other
relatable.
observation. So he plays 29 minutes. That's obviously going to get ramped up. Paul plays 35 minutes. The split of shots here between the three big guys on Phoenix: 18 for Booker, 15 for Paul, 18 for Durant. Mm-hmm. I gotta imagine Booker and Durant are like above 20. And Paul's maybe even like a little lower once things kind of really get down to it. I can't imagine like Josh Okogie, bless his heart, is taking 10 shots like in certain playoff games. Like maybe they come his way, maybe he has to, but I think like the thing is this felt like just like okay, we're wetting our whistle. We got Durant back. This isn't going to be perfect right away. We're all trying to figure this out. But it's going to just keep escalating and getting bigger minute totals and more shot attempts and more Kevin Durant-ness, I think, as we get these last couple of regular season games and Durant gets comfortable.
I actually think the opposite is going to happen. Not that you're probably right on the shot distribution in general, especially I know you're sort of getting us ahead to like a game 5, a game 7 of a playoff series, and you're probably right in those situations. But what the interesting thing about last night's game is that they looked more like the Suns with Kevin Durant on the team, whereas the first 3 games, the Suns looked like a Kevin Durant team that happened to be wearing purple and orange or blue in some cases, which they do now. And so you saw more of that traditional killer pick and roll attack that they've sharpened to one of the best offensive anythings in the NBA, but instead of Jay Crowder, Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges running some of those second side, off-ball screens or running a secondary pick and roll off some ball movement or just spacing the floor, which is a crazy thing to say that Kevin Durant can also do and punish a defense with. You just saw Durant in those spots, right? And so I actually felt like that was a positive coming off of this game, is that you were able to see Chris Paul have a pretty solid, aggressive, consistent game, which has not been common for him this year, and Ayton get a couple of lob opportunities, a couple of downhill moments, still not quite where you want him to be shot attempt-wise, but it felt more normal. It didn't just feel like Durant and Booker, leading the team to victory, which is going to happen and is totally fine as a winning formula itself. But if you're talking about, 20 playoff games, winning 16 playoff games to win a championship, it can't just be that over and over. And I thought last night was a good step forward for that. But to your point on Okogie too, they're going to funnel shots to players like that. And between his offensive rebounds and the open threes that defenses are just going to kind of leave him open for, that's going to be an interesting subplot. In those first 3 games with Durant, those guys, Okogie, Craig, Ish Wainwright, etc., they were getting an absurd number of shots, and it was a win for the defense because the Suns were sort of giving into let's find the open man, even if it's not one of our all-star level guys. I thought 10 is probably on the low end for what that 5th guy is gonna end up getting. And it'll be interesting to see, does Okogie make those shots? Is it somebody else? In the Dallas game, the biggest game that they've played with Durant where they beat the Mavs, Okogie took a bunch. I think he was 0 of 8 from 3, and then Ish Wainwright got 5 threes and ended up swinging the game because I think he made 4 of them. So that 5th guy is still going to play a major role even if they get some of this stuff sorted out, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. Durant has this interview that goes out with Shams today as well that he's doesn't care about legacy and all of that. But what did he have to say about his return? What was kind of the Durant mood after the game?
I think a lot of I haven't read the full Shams interview yet. I have it saved, but I saw some of the pullouts on Twitter and whatnot. And I think he's been trying to have that mentality ever since he got to Brooklyn, really, and if you listen to him on his own podcast after he got traded to Phoenix and he kind of talked about how things ended in Brooklyn, what he's doing here. I think, it's a lot of the same. It's hard to parse because obviously if you don't care about winning at all, then you're not, you wouldn't be as great as you are as an athlete. But I also think that there's a healthy perspective to try to have, and it's interesting to kind of watch him in real time, try to navigate that. There's actually another guy on this list who I think we're going to get into some of that with regard to in Portland. But yeah, I think Durant was sort of just happy to get back out there and like get to play with the people that he, commandeered his way into playing with. One last stat for you on KD though, before we move on.
Yeah.
He's now played 127 minutes with the Suns. Not a lot, obviously. They're outscoring teams by 15.3 points per 100 possessions when he's out there. And that includes last night. That includes the close Dallas game. And that includes a couple of blowout wins over Charlotte and Chicago. Even with the depth concerns, even with a bad shooting night last night, even with some minute restrictions at times, he's just been a basically human win for the Suns. They're 4-0 with him. And I'm interested to see. They play Denver on Friday. They play the Lakers coming up. They play Denver again, and then the Clippers to close out the season. Does that continue as they play some great teams rather than some middling teams and bad teams? We'll see. But he's been exactly what they've wanted, even though it's just been kind of stop and go.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think it's probably good for them to get some of these games with stakes. With with a little more of a competitiveness to it. Like late March basketball, early April basketball, depending on who you play, can sometimes not be the crispest. It can lack a little focus depending on what teams do or do not have to play for. Even teams that are, kind of like have their seed locked up, you can see sometimes like their foot comes off the gas a little bit on certain nights, and they're just like, okay, like we don't need to bust our butts for this one. We can look ahead a little bit. So I think it's ultimately health provided, probably good for Phoenix to have to go through some of that stuff. I think ultimately it's a small thing, but I think that stuff does matter.
You mentioned Minnesota. Our second return is Karl-Anthony Towns, and I think honestly, salute to Karl-Anthony Towns before we even break down any of the semantics on this one, because the dude had a hellacious experience during the pandemic, and he was very vocal and honest about that. Then he gets this calf injury, and it sounds like he was pretty damn close to tearing his Achilles if he had pushed the recovery initially any harder than he did. Then he had to kind of start over. Ended up missing like 3+ months with something that they gave a 6-week timeline for initially, although he even said that was kind of bogus. It was never realistic, but still, I don't think he expected 3 months. So salute to him for even getting back onto the court. You mentioned that this game against Phoenix on Wednesday, Chris, was a little bit sluggish and just messy. And honestly, I feel like that's kind of what Minnesota has settled into as an identity. They have a lot of size, which you would think is obvious with Towns and Gobert. But even McDaniels, Anderson, Naz Reid, who they'll play as double big lineups, they have that. They rebound, they keep possession of games, and they tend to not turn the ball over a ton, although they did in this Suns game. You're having a lot of these low-scoring wins by Minnesota where the scoring is pretty balanced, everybody chips in, and they just seem to have an identity, which is surprising for a team that, like we just said, was without Towns for a good portion of the year.
Yeah, I feel like there's stuff to be figured out. And I think it helps that they have guys who are very smart. They have Chris Finch, who's I think a really good coach and knows how to design an offense. And before he was a head coach, was incredibly well thought of as an offensive game planner type. I think Mike Conley for that trade is sort of funny because it's clearly just we don't want D'Lo, but you have Mike Conley who knows how to play basketball, knows how to organize things, knows how to kind of keep the trains moving along. He had a quote in this NBA.com piece that I'm going to read that I found kind of funny. Quote, "I've played with pick and pop bigs and guys who can roll. Marc Gasol is probably the closest comparison as far as offensive game. It worked pretty well in Memphis. I'm eager to play with all the pieces together." He's comparing Gasol to Towns, which is just very funny because Towns and Gasol are offensive. I understand there's some similarities and Gasol would shoot it, but Towns is a volume shooter in a way that Gasol really wasn't. So there is just even with that some of the adjustment stuff. This is. Would it shock you at this point, depending on how fast this comes along, if they are a first round, can pull an upset in round one, depending on who they play? I don't know if I would be super surprised. There are clearly still things to figure out. There are clearly still Towns Gobert things that I think are kind of under the surface that are kind of, you got to figure that stuff out and make that work, and defensively especially make it work. A lot of Gobert's quotes of late I think have really hit on that. But like I like this team, just seems kind of good. And I'm intrigued to see kind of what they can kind of pull together here the rest of the way. Not a title contender, but I think definitely a hard out in round one if they depending on who they play.
They're pretty experienced, like Edwards and McDaniels are the young guys, quote unquote, but they're some of the better players on the team. They've also now been through a playoff series coming off of last year, and a lot of the other pieces, whether it's Gobert, Towns, Conley, Anderson, even Jordan McLaughlin, who's kind of just this, traditional 5'11" backup point guard who doesn't really make mistakes and treads water while he's out there. They're all just steady, and I feel like that really goes a long way when you talk about the way that they've been able to just sort of control games. I don't know if I'm picking them in a Western Conference playoff series. I do think the Minnesota Lakers play-in game, if we get that, is going to be potentially very, very good and entertaining. Ant and Towns going head-to-head with LeBron and AD. Maybe I pick the Lakers, but I still think it would be a very competitive game. But yeah, I mean, Minnesota-Memphis rematch, maybe Minnesota has the upper hand. I doubt it. I don't think I would pick them. But they've at least been able to salvage this season, and Towns coming back when he did gave them enough time to feel like they have an idea of what this is. And I think the returns have been better than expected, especially better than the jokes would have led you to believe. I have a question for you, though. Did you see what Rudy Gobert said about the officiating?
Oh, I did.
These quotes?
And no one.
What in the
I
hell
read them.
is he doing?
Look, here's the thing. I don't think anyone
Is
is
it
happy
like
with officiating
a
right
deep
now.
state? Like
No,
is
it
the guy,
definitely reads. It definitely
like what? Yeah.
It definitely read like Rudy Gobert was like the QAnon like guy of like against NBA refs. Like they were like he basically gave the Luka money sign without giving but like in word form. Like he was articulate about it. You know what I mean? Like these quotes were very out there. I also just think broadly like no one seems happy with any of the officiating right now. The Cavs Hawks game the other night, both sides were just like repeatedly very annoyed about a lot of officiating things, and like I think certainly like the Luka thing obviously has gotten a lot of thing. And Jeff Van Gundy talked about this recently on Zach Lowe's podcast, and I tend to think that a lot of what he said about guys being able to say whatever they want with no repercussions is frankly correct. But no one seems happy with how basketball is being called right now. Pretty much every day I feel like I'm seeing someone complaining about the refs in some way, shape, or form. And the Gobert thing is just like the most extreme of those, maybe.
Yeah. It was bizarre. And, Suns fans have a gripe about officiating themselves because it's just been an ongoing thing, especially in the playoffs. And so a lot of people were pulling and being like, Minnesota actually gets a lot of free throws. So I'm not even really sure what he's talking about. Gobert is definitely by no means a player who, consistently lives at the line. It was strange. But I pulled the lineup data with Towns and Gobert on the court, and the returns now, it is 938 possessions, and they're +1 per 100. It's not terrible, and their current starting lineup hasn't played enough to log. The D'Angelo Russell starting lineup was actually pretty solid, +5.4 per 100 possessions. With the Conley one, I think it's +2.5, it looks like. So it's been able to survive and be a positive. You maybe want it to be a little better than that, but I just think people have fixated a little too much on how bad it was from a value standpoint with the trade itself, and not enough on the fact that it's working.
Sure,
it's working
yeah.
fine. They've taken a step forward, I think, as a team, or at least stayed afloat, and they're still good. Could win a playoff series. That's where they were last year. It wasn't some monumental failure of team building.
Yeah, what I think, and maybe this is like a line in the sand we can draw on this show, I think, together, is trades will happen. We can say this trade makes sense from a value standpoint or it doesn't. And I think at a certain point, you just got to say we have to move on and evaluate what is in front of us. And I think with the Wolves, it's like you just have to evaluate Gobert as he's in front of you. and not focus. So I think you're right in saying you don't need to focus so much on the trade you gave up at this point. He's a Timberwolf now. If you go a big picture, where are the Wolves at? That certainly plays a part in it. But in us talking about the play-in race, the fact that they gave up all those picks for him and all that stuff to do this, it's not exactly as relevant to me as it would if we're having like a much bigger conversation where the trade just happened.
All right, let's move on to the first absence that we're discussing, which is Paul. Yeah.
Well, Brendan, real quick. We do have there is a little bit of news I think
yes,
we should hit on.
I did. Julius
I don't
Randle.
know if you saw this, but we should hit on this.
Tell us the update.
Okay. So we should
just
hit
an
on
absence,
this real quick.
Right?
Okay, so he's going to be – so, yes, this is an absence, but this is like the biggest news hook that we have. He is going to be out, the Knicks say, a minimum of 2 weeks. Guess what starts in about 2 weeks?
The NBA playoffs.
The NBA playoffs. So this injury did not look good. This injury, if you read the quotes post game from the Knicks, did not seem exactly super optimistic. They play 5 more games in the regular season, including a game against Cleveland in Cleveland on Friday. And they are currently, if they're 4 games back of the Cavs, they are 3.5 games up on the Nets. So they might still be able to be that 5 seed. I think that seems pretty possible considering there's not a ton of time left for the Nets to make that up. But if Randle is out, and like this is like something that persists and costs in playoffs, like this cooks their season. It's absolutely like they're not winning a series. I don't think they're beating the Cavs anyway.
I've heard.
I know you do. You're on the record of saying this.
I've heard you don't think that they're going to beat the Cavs. No,
but if you don't have Julius Randle, who's having an All-NBA season, you're not winning a first-round series. You're just
agreed.
Not.
I mean, that goes without saying, right? I mean, I think that the limitations of their team have always centered on the fact that their half-court offense, especially, is driven almost entirely by Brunson and Randle, and so either one of them going out, you would expect would limit them quite a bit. I think they actually survived better than expected without Brunson because their depth, I think, is stronger at guard. Right,
Yep.
Quickly stepped up. He had his big game in that stretch when they beat Boston. You have had Grimes and other guys get hot from 3 or just do a little more with the ball in their hands. Even Barrett at times kind of has slid in. I think he played pretty well when Brunson was out, so they don't have anything close to what Randle is. I mean, there's really no player in the entire NBA that's super similar to what Randle is. I guess like Anthony Davis maybe, but you're not going to say, okay, Obi Toppin, go to work. Like that's not happening.
Exactly. Yeah. Obi Toppin play 35, 40 minutes. And
Can you just make like 8 threes and get like 12 assists and like 14 rebounds, Obi? Like, good luck.
Hey, can you carry our half court offense in the playoffs against a front court of Evan Mobley and Jared Allen?
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Thanks, please. Like that was already going to be hard, and like you're asking, like, wait, like, and it's a bummer. Like I will say, like this is a bummer. You don't want injuries at this time of the year to anybody, of anyone, particularly the guys that are playing at the level Randle is. I would like to see more competitive series, and if it's just this takes the wind out of their sails, I think. But we will see. We will revisit this like when that series is locked up, when we know maybe a little bit more about Randle. We'll kind of see what the reporting says beyond what the official team says. Let's go to our next
it's Paul
absence.
George. So this was incredibly gruesome, which I just feel bad for Paul George with. He's had several of those, at least the major one with the leg once upon a time. And this one was kind of like what happened to Giannis in the 2021 conference finals with the hyperextension. And it came in just like the very, very last moments of the game. And they've said 2 to 3 weeks and then a reevaluation. And that was basically starting last week. So, we will see what their official diagnosis is, but we've had Shams Charania in the meantime coming out and saying Paul George is going to be out for an extended period of time. You try to get out of the first round if you're the Clippers to give yourself a chance to get him back. Missing the entire first round, Chris, it seems as if they are probably going to play Phoenix. I would have been excited for that series if everybody had been healthy, but I don't feel great about it with no Paul George. I mean, is there any hope for the Clippers to win a playoff series? We just did this with Randle if Paul George is not around.
No, and like I think to the Clippers' credit, like Russ was incredible against the Grizzlies. Really showed up big in that game, played amazing. And look, I think he's actually been pretty helpful for them. I think particularly while Paul has been out and double so, and Kawhi's out, like he's actually been a pretty effective player for them in the way they've kind of needed him to be.
Russ 31. What did he have the other night?
He had like 31, and he's like trash talking
36.
Dillon Brooks.
Wow. Yeah.
And
Russ won the NBA public
and
0, I guess.
Photo,
big W for Russell Westbrook there.
Well, and then the photo above him, like I'm trying to recreate it stupidly on YouTube and pulling away from my mic, but like he's like flexing up in the air. I thought was like incredible. I just like maybe one of the best sports photos like I've seen. But yeah, like I mean, you don't have Paul George. It's like you're in it. The way that what Sham said about it, it seems like maybe he's not even going to be back for round 1. And like, are you getting out of round 1 against like even if the Suns are patching things together, are you slide to 6 and you get the Kings? Like you shouldn't like it's so much on Kawhi at that point, and he's been Brendan. I think somewhere between a top 5 to 7 NBA player the last couple months. Like he has been a Terminator. He has been like. Great Kawhi, but is that enough? If he's that for a 7-game series, is that enough to get them, even with a lot of the role guys I like, even with some of the tinkering they're doing? I don't know if that's like enough to carry over a Kings team that has this insane offense and over the Suns team that has all of the scoring power it does. Like it's asking so much of Kawhi, and regardless of how good he's been in whatever way you want to evaluate that, I think that's just like putting them in a really tough spot.
It's been a weird year for Paul George. Clippers fans don't seem to like him very much. I feel like
I think it's just been a weird year for the
weird
like
half
general,
decade
but like
for
Paul's
the Clippers,
at the
right? I mean, since they got these guys.
Well, did you see the clips of Ty Lue going around? How he talked about like he had like 7 family members die and he couldn't go back he didn't feel like he could go back to any of the funerals.
What is going on?
This and like that's a guy in Ty who like if you remember when he's in Cleveland he steps away for a little bit. Like this guy has been through some stuff, and it's just like at a certain point like the gravity of that, the weight of that, I think absolutely has to kick you down a little bit.
Sure,
like that's hard.
I mean for Ty and the players who care about him and whatever. This was supposed to be the season that they got things back on track, right? That this was, there will be a load management. We're kind of a new team, relatively speaking, because there's some pieces we have to integrate, and then Russ comes along. But all things considered, this was supposed to be the peaceful year, and it hasn't been. They haven't really had one because, the pandemic hits the end of their first season together, then the Kawhi injury, and now this. Paul George also got COVID right before the play-in game last year, and they ended up losing. Like, it just has been hamstrung, this group, this core. So, I think Paul George at his best when he's getting downhill, when he's distributing the ball, when he's not just settling for jumpers. We've seen that in flashes at times this season, but, it's not been consistent. So Kawhi is definitely the best player on this team. I think, I'm not going to put it past him to keep any series relatively competitive. They have enough depth here to make up for some of these things. Obviously, we just talked about the fact that they beat the fully healthy, Grizzlies, although obviously Steven Adams and Brandon Clark are out like they will be for the rest of the year. That's a pretty impressive win, and no Kawhi in that game either. I just, you're talking about, Phoenix with Durant and everything else. I don't feel very strongly about it. Any more PG thoughts, or can we go to another return, be on a more positive note here?
The only other thoughts that I have kind of about there is that I do just want to again hit, as much as I am not the big, we were not, I think, collectively the biggest Russ guy. I like some of the stuff with him got really weird, like the vampire from the locker room stuff got weird, right? Like I as someone who has really enjoyed Russ, and I think we all sometimes could benefit from having like the Russ attitude and like the mental fortitude that dude used to have in himself. Like I certainly at times lately felt like I could use a little more just like self drive at that level, like that just purely kind of just like unbreakable level. It kind of really makes me happy that Russ is doing some really important stuff for the Clippers. And there's an SB Nation blog that he's like saved their season. I don't know if I'd go that far, but he's been awesome for them. And like it just makes me the non-cynic in me is just really happy to see
you
Russ
remember
doing
that
some cool
meme
stuff.
construction that was like get you a man who or whatever, and then it would be X thing that you should try to find in your partner.
Yes.
I feel like it should just be get you a personality that is as strong with the mental fortitude and self-confidence that Russell Westbrook has. Like, I don't even forget trying to like date or marry somebody like Russ. I just want to have it. I just want to consume the personality traits and then you take advantage of them. I don't really want to like have proximity to it. I want it. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I want to be able to like have all this drama surrounding me, and then just like get in my car, post a clip to Instagram
You won't break
or
my
Twitter
soul.
or whatever
Yeah.
of like Beyonce is like, you don't break my soul. Yeah, and just vibing. That's the energy I need to bring into my life.
It's 2023.
That's like really what I need to do. I need to just like wake up every morning.
That's what we can all
and do
aspire
that.
to. All right,
Let's go.
Back
move
to the
on.
team that apparently thought Russell Westbrook was a vampire. The Los Angeles Lakers, they have welcomed LeBron James back to their locker room, and they are looking pretty solid. I have a question before we get into this one as well for you, Chris. What are you the LeBron James of? Because this doctor that LeBron was able to track down to fix his apparently like ruptured foot tendon, which he also, if people didn't remember, he finished the game that he got that injury. Then you come to find out it was pretty severe, although I always feel like superstars tend to embellish a little bit on that stuff. He posts the picture of himself in like a Bacta tank like in Star Wars, and then he is back and telling us that the secret and key to his success and his quick return and regeneration of this foot tendon was that he partnered up with, got treatment from the LeBron James of feet. So that's the background, but I also gave you a little time there. What is your what are you the LeBron James of?
Consuming media that makes me sad. Just consuming like music and movies and things that I'm just like, I'm always in my sad boy era. Like Brendan, we're recording this on Thursday the 30th, but you know what comes
the
out
Boy
on
Genius
the 31st?
album. Guess what? I got tickets.
Boy Genius.
I'm going.
You know who's gonna crush the?
I'm sorry to make you jealous. I don't think they're coming anywhere near you, but
so am I.
Oh, you are? Where?
No, I'm going. No, I'm going in June. I am. Yes,
Okay.
they're playing in Columbus. I'm going with friends of the program, Bill DiFilippo and Nick
Love it.
Camiotti. I get to go on and take a Friday off of work, drive down, and they're playing. It's part of that Reset Festival. So Barty Strange opening.
See,
I
so
get to see them in
that
Columbus.
festival
So, yeah,
thing, they're
but
not coming
I
to
got the
Phoenix. So I was counting on like, please do an actual tour. Don't just do this weird outdoor thing. And then they came in clutch.
Yeah.
And they're coming to Phoenix
Right.
for that. So great. We're both going to be happy. Well, I might not be happy. We're both going to enjoy ourselves.
If they play. If they play me and my dog, I might just like turn into a puddle of sad, and Bill will just have to like put me in a cup.
Well,
and, like,
I think while I respect the commitment to
what are you the
I was trying to
LeBron
think
James
of this because I knew the question was going to come back to me. I think I'm the LeBron James of. I want it to be cool. I don't want it to be like. Rewatching.
I've given up on being cool, man.
Okay, here. So probably rewatching. I'll say rewatching Adam Sandler films. I watched Happy Gilmore over the weekend. I think prior to that, I had just watched Just Go With It. Uncut Gems is like once every couple months. So there we go. That's what I'm the LeBron James of.
Are you I would like. Are you excited for the? Do you know that the Sandler
Reunite?
is gonna re-team with the Safdies for a move? Yeah, I'm really excited about that. In the sports card world, I don't really know what that means, but let's go. I don't know how a Safdies movie. They make these really intense, like crazy movies, like Good Time and Uncut Gems, and how they're gonna do that in the sports card world. Like I can't
just
wait to
picture.
see. But let's move on to like our actual topic,
let's not.
Los
Let's
Angeles
not.
Lakers.
I picture our just baseball guy, Aram Layton, who is a sports card guy, just like getting a very featured role and just grabbing Adam Sandler by like the collar of his shirt and barking into his face with like The Weeknd playing in the background and some sort of intense score and whatever.
Is he He's gonna be the guy from Uncut. I have the role of Uncut Gems of like the real guy who'd like done some stuff in real life, yelling, "You having a good time?" And he's gonna be screaming at it, Sandler.
That's it.
That's gonna
exactly.
be
So that is a movie I'm very excited for. That is what I am the LeBron James of. Let's get to him. So the Lakers are quietly 500 now. They're 6-4 in their last 10 games. They have had a couple of nice games. I think they beat the Bulls twice. Or no, they lost the first one. They beat them by 11 on Wednesday night. And I like this team. They're plus 5.1 per 100 possessions with AD and LeBron on the court this year. That's not elite, but it's solid. It's where you want to be. It means that when they are both healthy and playing well, that team is going to be hard to beat because they both are going to play a lot of minutes in the playoffs. I tried to look up some way to quantify this, and it didn't really show up in the numbers, so maybe I'm wrong. It feels like the ball moves better since the deadline. Even though they have guys like D'Angelo Russell and Dennis Schroeder who aren't necessarily, traditional like Chris Paul, Darius Garland, share the rock point guards, it just feels like it kind of pings around. There's better spacing. The roster makes more sense, and Anthony Davis is playing like an absolute monster. So I would not want to face this team. Provided LeBron's foot tendon and the LeBron James feet procedure all goes according to plan, I would not want to play them in the play-in. I would not want to deal with them in the first round if I'm Denver or Memphis. I think this is a real legit team that I don't think is a necessarily finals threat just because of the health and age concerns and depth concerns, but is definitely a first-round frisky team that I would want to avoid.
Winning a series for them is very much just in play. Like it feels very much in play, and I think you're stressing the right thing on the ball movement stuff. LeBron had a quote the other day that I think hits at this. He said that the number one thing is we have multiple ball handlers. So quote, no one has to feel stressed handling the ball every possession. We've got shot makers in that starting lineup, and we have a lot of length. The recipe is here. Like it is not like. It is funny that to some degree they have gone back to like the recipe of team that won the freaking title in the bubble. Right? Like it's like, oh, we did all of this stuff. We traded all of these picks and did all these things and made all these mistakes, and you kind of got back to a version of that. And like I don't think they're going to get to that same point. I'm agree with you on that. I think them winning 4 series, winning 16 games would be really hard. Like even if they somehow made it out of the West, like I don't think they'd match up well against any of those teams in the East, even with LeBron and AD. It's like I think the whoever comes out of the East is going to be the favorite. I think to win it all this year. That's where I
looked up the other day. Did you realize Milwaukee has 55 wins?
Yeah.
Like I know that just sounds like a really stupid observation to be like, did you check the standings the other day? But man, that's genuinely impressive.
Yeah, they're great.
So I agree with you. I think that they're the favorite, bulldozer. Or whoever gets out of the East, I think they would be the favorite to get out of the East is going to be the odds-on team. But I have. Do you think that the Lakers would? Let's set the Nuggets aside. Let's say I feel like I would pick the Lakers over the Wolves in the 7-8 play-in if that's what it ends up being. We'll get to another team in the play-in just a moment, but I'll say I would pick the Lakers. So let's say they get the 7 seed. Them or Memphis?
Mm-hmm. I'm probably picking the Lakers.
I feel like I might too.
And also just like that series is spicy. Like there's heat there, and it's like you get Triple J and AD, you get Ja going against like the LeBron of it all. Like you get LeBron trying to beat this younger team. Dillon Brooks will surely do something that will piss somebody off in that series. Will probably piss off LeBron at some point in that series. And we should note like beyond like the guys they got at the deadline, like Austin Reeves is just like legitimately pretty great for them, and like he feels like a guy that is going to show up in
their
the
new starting lineup. Russell, Reeves, James, Vanderbilt, Davis, 38 possessions, not a lot, plus 40.2 points per 100 possessions. They're per 100 possessions. They're outscoring teams by 40 per 100 possessions. Like that is. Probably one of the better starting lineups, provided it stays. It won't be that good forever, but if it's even anywhere near that, you're talking about one of the more statistically dominant starting lineups that will be in the playoffs. So I don't think it's crazy to buy into this team with the development that Reeves has had, with the trades. I even think like, they've kind of tamped down Rui's role. He's not been playing great, but like even the ability to kind of have him just be playing 12 minutes is not like horrible. Like they don't really have a lot of weak points in their roster when they're healthy. And Davis, man, like he's been just so good. Like I was thinking about this. Is Anthony Davis the best face-up scorer in the NBA? I think the other contenders would be Giannis, Randall, who we talked about, Joel Embiid, right? There's a lot of great ones. I think Davis might be the best considering the handle, the pull-up jump shot ability, and the size. You can't really contest his jumper, and he can dribble past you with the quickness and angles that he can get to, and he just dunks on your head when you're not expecting it all the time. I think he might be the best. I think I might genuinely think he's better than all those guys I just listed.
Yeah, I might give Giannis just a slight edge because I feel like Giannis is a little bit more inevitable just because of the strength and some of the bruising nature of what he can do. But there certainly is a ton of craft in AD. Like I would definitely put him ahead of Randall for sure. I mean, like the pull-up game, the ability to kind of switch into a post-up if he needs to, some of the footwork. Brendan, the real only question I have with this team is just health. That's where I'm at with it. Like, is LeBron going to be healthy enough? Is AD going to be healthy enough? If those guys are healthy, they're going to be a pain. And if one of them gets hurt, then like we're back to just where we were because this team is like, in the plane race and stuff. But like certainly that's where let me ask you this before we wrap up on the Lakers. Who do you have more faith in making the conference finals? The Lakers or the Warriors?
I think I still have to say the Warriors. I think Curry is the best player of anybody on those two teams. I think that they have vastly more, institutional knowledge than the Lakers. I mean, the other part of the Lakers thing is they've never really played they haven't played many important games with each other. This is a team that, even though the trades were good, it still was 2 months ago or 1 month ago that happened. And so they're not exactly like a seasoned, experienced group. But I mean, I think next week we're going to do sort of like our final questions heading into the final week of the season. And one of mine is, are we ever getting Andrew Wiggins back? And if not, then maybe the Lakers is the answer.
It doesn't seem like it. Yeah, I mean, this could be second round if the Warriors stay at 6, and we'll see what happens, obviously, vis-a-vis the Clippers, who are 5 right now. You could get Warriors-Lakers round 2 if both those teams pull off upsets. Or you get like a Lakers-Kings series maybe, which is like a throwback to the 90s in a very fun way. And there's a lot of fun There's a lot of fun stuff. And look, Brendan, it kills me to admit it. Sometimes it is just more fun when the Lakers are involved than LeBron, and particularly for me when LeBron is involved. When LeBron is involved, it feels bigger. Things feel like just like a
I will tell you, as somebody who had a vested interest in the Suns beating them in a very similar 2-7 type of matchup in 2021, regardless of whatever optimism I had about some advantages the Suns might have maintained in that series, I was absolutely terrified. I don't think it's different that he's now 37-38 versus when he was 35-36 then. I don't care. If it's him and Davis even, you're never going to feel comfortable. They're going to own, the vibe and it's the Lakers, it's those two players. And when you're talking about Memphis or you're talking about Sacramento or you're talking about even Minnesota in the play-in, that matters. It's intimidating, it's nerve-wracking, and they're good now too, on top of all the whatever you want to throw in there as far as the superlatives that I just said. So we'll see. Another absence, which is a long time coming at this point. We had to cut this from the last show on our 2020 redraft, but Damian Lillard has been shut down this year and won't play the rest of the season for Portland. I thought some of the quotes that he has had the past week were really interesting and also very easily captured in little Instagram and Twitter takeoffs that make it a bad conversation. So let's have a better version of that conversation, because I do think it was interesting. He went on JJ Redick's podcast, which I didn't listen to, I will say, but I read the Okay.
So
he basically said, tell people what he said. Tell people what he said about ring culture and people thinking he might retire early was something I saw out there about what he was talking about, but you heard it, so tell us.
Yeah. So the gist of what he said was really like, I'm like not, he's like ring culture and all that. Like he kind of, without like saying anything, kind of condemned ring culture. It was kind of like, I have a life outside of this. Like I want to win. I'm competitive, but like I am not gonna just get myself kind of tied into all that. Like I think some of that is bogus. Like I have a family outside of this. Like I have like I'm a well-adjusted outside of this. He doesn't like seem like a guy who, as much as I think he is very competitive and clearly his track record indicates this, like isn't gonna just like chase that for the sake of chasing it. I that doesn't just seem how he's operated, regardless of what he said there. It just doesn't seem to me like he's a guy who it feels more like he's like, okay, like we need to do something maybe different with this pick to accelerate this or whatever. And like, that's what he's asking for more than trade me, which is, I think, is how a lot of people.
Yeah. I want to get into those comments, which he basically gave sort of once it became clear he was going to get shut down. He talked to Chris Mannix and was pretty open and honest, which he always is. But speaking of things we listen to, so I am a big Dan Le Batard show fan, and the co-host of that show, Stu Gatz, is big on don't tell me how to fan. That's like his perspective, whatever. He's obviously a caricature, but I think that perspective shines through in a moment like this. I don't want to say, I don't know how to frame this. I don't think we've gone like too far, because who am I to tell Damian Lillard how far to go when he's describing his own experience? But you start to get to a point from a fan perspective, people who dedicate a lot of their time and energy, whether you think it's silly or how much they should care or whatever, people do, in the success of the team that Damian Lillard leads, and people around the NBA that like him. I do think that's the thing with Lillard, is that it all is coming from a place of wanting him to succeed. Everybody wants him to get traded because they want to see him be in a better situation. And you get to a point not too far down that line of thinking where it's sort of like, what is any of this for then if I'm supposed to root for you to have a family? You know, I'm very much oversimplifying it on purpose to illustrate the point that I'm making, but I do sort of feel like the reason we keep coming back to this with Lillard is he talked about in those quotes the journey, right? Like the journey doesn't matter. We can't keep doing that. There are so many ways the league is different now, and basically saying we don't appreciate that. Like, dude, the journey's been 15 years for you. You know what I mean? And like, I do feel like, at least from my point of view, and I don't speak for everybody, I'm sure there's some toxic BS that he hears that's not as like thoughtful as what I'm trying to say, but like, no, like we want the journey to pay off. Like we want you to end up fulfilling that journey, and whether we like it or not, like that's measured in winning. And you're not doing a whole lot of that right now. So I don't know. I think it has veered too far with Lillard because it's just been this nonstop thing. He can't avoid questions about it. It never stops. But I don't think it's wrong that people want him to end up somewhere different, and they're looking at Portland and feeling like they're not capable of putting around him what they need to for this whole thing to work out. And you're looking down the barrel at Lillard retiring and never even winning a game in the conference finals. Like, that's what we're looking at here with him, and he's an amazing player that shouldn't have to deal with that.
Yeah, two things I think I would add to that. Number one, this has been maybe the best season of his career, and it's going to like mean nothing. And like you could see him pushed out of All-NBA because he's going to miss some time, and teams will, and I think very fairly you'll count like them not winning games against him. Secondly, they have a worse record this year than the Washington Wizards, who are like perpetually like the team we define is like stuck, and they're apparently like gearing up to give Kristaps Porzingis like a chunk of change. They have a worse record than the Bulls, who like are to a different level in a different way, kind of like in a weird space. They're tied right now record wise with the Magic, who are purposefully kind of like not very good and are very young, and that just doesn't feel like, for a guy as good as Dame is. And I understand the league is deeper and it's really hard, and like the roster has some really young pieces on it. That just doesn't feel like right for a guy of Dame's stature and of Dame's quality and the year he's had. So
Yeah.
it just feels weird. And then they're now dependent on lottery luck. Like, you know, they're going to be like you know, 5th or 6th in the lottery. For their sake, you'd hope they end up 5th. That's like a 9.8% chance of getting Wemby. You know, like they'd be a Brandon Miller team over Scoot, I imagine. 9.9% chance of that. 10% at 3, 10.1 at 4. And then 20, they're like most likely to be picking 6th or 7th. And just like, what is another 6th or 7th pick? Like, what is that really doing for you? Like, is that just continuing
that's what the other quotes were about. And
it's not,
just for people to hear where he was coming from with that, he said there comes a time where we have the right intentions, but we've got to execute. We have to actually make that come to life. He said he trusts Joe Cronin, the new GM over there. He said, you know, I don't think he would ever tell me one thing and then not do it. If anything, it would be that we did our best and we just couldn't. And then he said, I think I've always been firm, but like I said, if it comes time where they tell me, man, we can't get it done, maybe it's time for us to turn a page, I don't think that will be the case, but we'll see. Right now, all I know is I want to win. I think that is a little different than this tone that he's struck in the past. You know, I don't want to make it, will you get traded this summer? Because it's just kind of exhausting. I think it's easier to just listen to what he actually says. But I do think that's different than, I'm here. I want to be here. This is this is home. I want to build something. I love the people who stay with one franchise. Like, that's kind of been his perspective most of the time. This is sort of like, I trust the people doing this, but if it keeps not working, then it would only be natural for us to think about a change. And like, that's just true. It's not exactly groundbreaking, but it's just different than how he's framed it in the past.
Yeah, and look, I will say, like, you have seen guys like Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and Matt Barnes all kind of be like, look, like, they want to see him, kind of saying like they want to see him move on, see him do other stuff, and those are guys with prominent platforms that are former players.
And KG, somebody who feels it, right? I mean, he knows this situation.
Well, and KG's a guy that if you go back and read some of what he said, he almost like the read between lines of is he almost maybe stayed in Minnesota for too long and like wishes maybe he had like advocated for himself sooner to get to Boston, to get somewhere where he felt like he could evolve and win. And I wonder if I find that just sort of an interesting little bit with Dame, who again has had this insane season that like is gonna go for.
Yeah, I mean, like, and not to pick nits, it feels like you can't ever like be negative about Damian Lillard. It's one of those like NBA don't do that things, but they're also below 500 with him in the lineup this year. But even then, it's like Jeremy Grant has missed a lot of time. Anthony Simons has missed a lot of time. So even the roster when he's been out there and been great, it's been injuries and lack of depth, and almost all of their bench is just like super raw rookies or second-year guys. It's just not a roster you would picture a legendary Hall of Fame top 75 player being on as they kind of carry out their last great years. So I think it's fair that people are bummed out, and I do think most of the time that's where this talk is coming from, is just kind of disappointment that he's on a bad team when we love watching him and we want to see those moments like he had against Paul George in the playoffs with that super deep Dame time, you know, pointing at his wrist three, you know, that classic picture of him in the ESPN camera, all, you know, mean mugging and everything. Like, we want that again, and I don't think it's wrong to want that. So anyway, last absence, Zion Williamson. He is supposed to be reevaluated again this upcoming week. It sounds as if he might finally return. I don't really know how much we can predict here, Chris, but I guess what I will say is I thought that the Pelicans played really well against Golden State the other night. I think that they are back to playing good basketball. Brandon Ingram has been great in February and March. He's been basically 50, 40, 88 since February 1st, averaging 27 or so points per game. That is the, you know, all-star killer version of him that we expected that he wasn't when he was dealing with the toe early on. And I feel good about this team. I think they're a top 10 defense on the season as well. If Zion can come back,
I'll pull it up and check you.
I think that they will be a factor in the play-in, a team that I would probably pick over the Thunder if you're telling me Zion can play 25 minutes, 30 minutes a night and be close to something resembling himself. I think I would pick them to win that game.
Yeah, 6 in defense. Cleaning the Glass has this metric that tells you like what your win difference based on your point differential, and they're 28th. Like they should have 4 more wins based on what their point differential is, because they're 9th in point differential on the season still, which is impressive. It's still, to me though, Brendon, just feels like kind of disappointing. And like Zion getting back would be great. I'm all for that. I think that would be really fun and good to see. The thing that is just a bummer is that it feels like the season could have been more for them. The season just still feels to me like it could have been like a real ascendant season. Like there's probably another universe where like they have the kind of the ascendant year the Kings had, and are like up in the top near the East or the West, and being very celebrated and having all these euphoric moments, and like you're just not gonna get that with them. And would you pick like if they were to be the 8th seed? Like they're not gonna beat Denver. I don't think
even
they're gonna beat Denver.
Even with Zion,
even with Zion back, they're not gonna beat Denver.
Look, I mean, I don't know if I would have picked them. Maybe, yeah. I mean, look, what I was gonna say is it kind of reminds me of. I hope it doesn't end up this way, but it kind of reminds me of the season that Minnesota had after the Jimmy Butler trade. If you remember, they were like up in the top 4 for half the year. Then they dealt with injuries. I think they took 1 game from Houston in that first round series, and then Butler doesn't ever play there again. There wasn't a trade in this case, but you could see change having to come just because you can't wait on health forever. You can't keep your team the same saying, well, if this and if that will just be great. They have these tax concerns coming up and all this stuff. This is sort of the season. And like you said, I think that's where a lot of the disappointment comes from, is it just wasn't able to click. And now you're talking about, can he play the final weekend of the regular season and then be amazing in the play-in game? Like it might just be what Zion's career is, but that doesn't mean you have to feel great about it, if you're evaluating and analyzing them. And yeah, it's insane that they're 9th in net rating. That doesn't make any sense at all. This has been a dumb season, to be completely honest. It's not even an insult to them, but like what is happening in the NBA if the regular season ends up with a team that loses in the play-in being top 10 in net rating? That doesn't really add up. But yeah, I hope he plays. He's one of my absolute favorite players to watch. He's on my wall behind me, but it's hard to feel anything close to certainty about any of this right now, including what happens this summer.
Yeah, look, I think the West, regardless of where all this shakes out, there's still a ton to figure out. We're headed towards chaos. Like, chaos is a ladder in the Western Conference. It's just where we are at. And like right now, the Mavericks are outside of the play-in tournament. They are the 11th seed, and like Kyrie's calling them a clusterfuck. Here we are. Like, this is where we're at the last week of the where the East feels kind of like we know what it is to some degree, with like who's going to be in, and who gets, with some jockeying back and forth to see who ends up where. The West is a little just like the Jazz aren't out of it yet. They're I don't think they're going to get in, but they're a game and a half back of the 10th spot right now. Like we're in for some fun stuff the rest of the way in the West. And the Pelicans, I think, especially with Zion back, are at the they are a part of that, and that is at least good, even if I'm not super optimistic about what is to come.
It should be a fun play-in the West. Should be a blast in the playoffs. Hopefully, guys like...
Imagine if the Warriors slide into the play-in. Can you imagine?
That first year of the play-in, we got Lakers-Warriors, which is like an all-timer. So I'm down. But yeah, I mean, hopefully guys like Paul George, Andrew Wiggins, etc. do come back, because I want to see the best versions of all these teams. But as we just talked about, none of this is a certainty in terms of players being available, let alone winning and being their best. That'll wrap us up for today, though, guys.
I did Google Andrew Wiggins real quick to see if we got an update.
They said he's going to come back soon or something. They're not planning for him to miss the regular season, right? Wasn't that what it was?
Yeah. Yeah. Steve Kerr said that Wiggins returning at some point, quote, hasn't even been discussed, end quote. So we'll see. I don't know what that means. Yeah. But it's something.
They say at the same time, we don't have any expectations for him to be back soon, but also we don't think for sure that he's going to miss the rest of the regular season. It's like, hey, Steve, there's a week left. What's up? I don't know. So anyway, I sounded like a New Yorker at a bar there, but that's going to be the end of our show. Thanks.
You were.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were just there.
You were just there. That's what it takes out of us. We should have really been that for the Julius Randle segment, I think, more than anything. Just channel that vibe. But thank you to Dylan Heiser and Jake Stevens for producing the show. To all of our listeners, followers, subscribe to us wherever you're finding us, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on all of these absences and returns. Follow us on social media wherever you are. We are Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. And we will see you all next week.